Hello everyone and welcome to Truckee Talks. I'm Ted Owens with my annual discussion about the weather and local history with my guest this evening, Mark McLaughlin. Mark, welcome. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Ted. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Well, we have a lot to talk about. I think first off, what most folks would want to hear about right off the bat is how did your feelings this time last year about what the weather was going to be compare to what actually happened?
Well, I think I said last year the fact that we were out of the La Nina was dissipating and there was no El Nino building, so there was no oceanic signatures, that we would be in a situation that we had a good chance of just having a normal winter. And I was so wrong.
But you're still working.
I was so wrong, yeah.
Well, since you mentioned El Nino and La Nina, those events, could you describe for me and the folks at home what the differences are between the two? What do they do? How do they affect our region?
Very simplistically, the El Nino is it's an oscillation, atmospheric and oceanic coupling that tends to create a strong subtropical flow of moisture into California and into the Southwest. La Nina is a cooling of the sea surface temperatures in the Pacific. That tends to create an enhanced flow in the Pacific Northwest. Right now, we are in between. It is called ENSO neutral. The El Nino, it's really called ENSO, meaning El Nino Southern Oscillation. It's part of that atmospheric pressure change, a seesaw effect between over by Australia and off the coast of northern South America. So we are now, once again, very much like last year, there's no strong dynamics in the ocean to help long-range forecasters make a confident forecast, long-range outlook for this winter coming up. Basically, NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, has just released their forecast for this winter. High variability and very much a sequel to last year, which doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be record dry in California and in the Pacific Northwest, but it does seem to be stormy and very cold in the northern central part of the country and in New England, and also some cold waves in the deep south, and also possibility of enhancements of some nor'easters for the middle Atlantic coastal cities. So there's a lot of activity, and we're caught kind of in that ambivalent zone where really it's going to be hard to say. I was mentioning to you before, there are these other oscillations. Everybody is very familiar with El Nino and La Nina. It's made headlines for the last 2 decades. However, this year we are experiencing this, the Madden Julian oscillation, which tends to, and it doesn't have the kinds of impacts or the strong signatures on patterns.
Does this oscillation occur in a particular place?
No, they're all global. But people want to know how it affects my part of the world. Mm-hmm. These are very large in aerial extent, these kinds of things, large swaths of atmosphere. We're talking hemispheric things, and it's a very big picture. And we've really kind of identified some of the strong influences that come from a strong El Nino or a strong La Nina. It really does come together, but we're right in that nebulous point, and so we have this Madden-Julian oscillation, which the forecast from that has been that there is a better than even chance, or I shouldn't say that, not a better than even chance, but a better chance this year than has been for the last several for heavy extreme precipitation events in the Pacific Northwest region. And then there's also this Arctic oscillation, which affects the blocking high pressure over Alaska, which tends to dramatically affect the weather in the northern tier of the United States and over towards New England. So there's a couple of things in play here, and this Madden-Julian oscillation really only comes to fruition or identifies itself, and it's very vague. It's almost, you see it after what it has really done, and it really only becomes a player when we are in that ENSO neutral phase, where there's no strong warming, sea surface temperature warming, and no real dramatic chilling, even though now, since through the summer...
Now, that's where we are right now.
That's where we are right now, and through this summer, the sea surface temperatures have been rising, mostly due to solar from the summer, but is projected to continue on to a very weak El Nino condition next spring. And the Climate Prediction Center for the U.S., which is a different outfit than NOAA, who uses more oceanic, they have predicted that we're looking like normal average precip, above normal in temperatures, and of course these are long-range forecasts, and it looked like enhanced precipitation or above average precipitation next April, May, June, and July, which I don't know what that really means. June and July, we're basically dead in the water, as far as
What it sounds
storms.
like to me, though, and correct me if I'm wrong, with a lot of the oscillations you're speaking of and things that are occurring out there around the globe, you would have a better picture perhaps this time next year about next winter's predictions than you have about this year's, because we're in things are in play right now. We're in that nebulous middle zone.
Yes, that's true. However, very weak to lightly moderate El Niños and La Niñas do not create that same dramatic trend if they're not really strongly developed. Now, we've come out of some really tremendous pendulum swings in the ocean in the last 20 years. I mean, we had the 1982-83 El Nino. That was the biggest in 100 years. We had the 97. That was the biggest in 100 years. It didn't give us the same kind of weather ramifications, even though we were like 160% of normal. It wasn't like 83, where it was 200% of normal and floods and things all around the planet. So
Now, is that something that's only because we are paying attention to this warming of the oceans now, but we didn't have the capability of monitoring that 50 years ago, so it's really just, how do we know if it's a 100-year event?
Right. Before the satellite and before we started getting more buoy systems and observations from both the atmosphere, radio sondes, all these things, it was very anecdotal. Fishermen would say, we're bringing in tropical fish, or this, that, and the other. It's been going on for a long, long time, millennium. It's been going on for a really long time. The data are better. The computers are faster, and but
Well, since you brought high tech into it, I think I'd kind of like to bring up the Farmer's Almanac.
geez.
And I've read it, and
Okay.
I've seen what it's predicting. I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on that publication.
Well, we were talking about this. It's a folksy,
You can go ahead and say what you said before we were on.
publication. That it is. But a colleague of mine, Jan Null, who's a meteorologist in San Francisco, Golden Gate Consulting Services, he did an analysis of last year's predictions of precipitation events for the Northern California, Pacific Northwest region, and he correlated everything with what the prediction was by the Farmer's Almanac and what actually occurred, and their accuracy rate was 23%.
Batting 230, not particularly
Not
good.
that good. Well, if you're a batter in the World Series, that's
pretty
real
good. Yeah,
But
that's true. Now, you're also, in addition to being a weather historian, you're also a historian of the local region, Lake Tahoe. You've got a couple of books out. I always flub the
Sierra
title.
Stories, True Tales of Tahoe.
And there's volume 1 and volume 2
Volume one
of
and
that,
volume
and those
two.
are on the bookshelves here in town and around the lake and what have you. I think that we'll probably put a banner up also on the screen in a moment that'll tell the folks at home how you can get in touch with Mark or his webpage and order those books if you'd like. What have you been up to? Any new books? Or are you still working on your train book?
Still working on it. It's in the chute, but just came out. One of my jobs is I work for the Alternative Energy Institute. I'm the lead writer. We are a nonprofit educational organization based at Lake Tahoe.
And that's what we're going to be getting into in the second segment.
Yes, yes.
And that's been taking up your time. So
That took up the last year and a half.
So I'm kind of wondering, there's a bet here, $20, say, I don't know. Either I'll give you your choice. You can finish the train book by this time next year when we do this again,
No
or
problem there.
what about weather predictions? What do you think?
For next year?
Yeah, for this year.
winter coming up?
Yeah, $20, friendly
All right.
bet.
I say it will be wetter than last year.
Okay, you're choosing weather, so it'll be wetter than last year. We were, 55% of normal last year, 60?
Reno came in at 23%, the driest in history in 138 years of record. The Tahoe Basin's running at 50%, and Randall Osterhuber at the Central Sierra Snow Lab came in at 73%. And see, that's the thing, you got to be really
So what do you
careful.
think? What do you
These
think?
are all microclimates. Each one of these is a different hydrologic region and a different climatic zone. And so not one prediction will encompass all of them at all.
So let's bet on your train book.
Oh, I will bet that it'll be
$20
out for
at what?
Father's Day next year.
Father's Day?
By Father, yeah.
Okay.
$20?
$20.
You saw it, folks.
And we'll pay off next time this year, or this time next year. Okay, now tell me, any anecdotes from recent studies on local history, anything you've come across, nothing too exciting, or?
No.
Okay, well, I'll move right on.
There's lots of things to talk about.
You know, I've got something I'd like to hear you talk about. Our particular region, Truckee in particular, has been quote unquote discovered, if you will. And I'm kind of curious, I was thinking earlier today, from a historian's perspective, how do you think a person such as yourself, a historian, would treat Truckee during this period of time, what we're doing here?
In the future?
In the future.
Well, I think part of what's going to come out of this is how the infrastructure is developed. You know, it's the typical thing. Once somebody arrives somewhere that they want to live, they want to say, oh, why is anybody else coming here? It's not, you know, shut the gate or do whatever you want to do. And I think what worries me is the fact that there's no very large overall regional comprehensive plan for transportation and development in the region. We have, and this is germane to the West at large, you know, all of California, all Nevada.
Consistent with our history.
That's right. We have very microcosm kinds of things with local governments, and people are unwilling to give up control for an overarching regional plan, in a sense. And I think, as we were talking about this, and I said it brought to mind is, you know, paved paradise and put up a parking lot.
Right.
Now, I saw that in the early 90s down in Reno, and they're just going to fill that whole basin. It's just going to be filled with homes and everything. And it's not that I'm against people, but at some level, what I believe happens is even if people make more money on a year-to-year basis, I believe that the quality of life suffers, and that's at least as important as the money you make by the hour or by the annual wage.
So, you know, I'm actually right now reading Cadillac Desert.
Okay.
And it's kind of fascinating, and the reason I asked the question is...
Scary too.
It is scary too, that's right. But we will be looking back 50 years from now at planning decisions that are made jurisdictionally today, yet you're speaking of a region that might encompass Lake Tahoe, Truckee, north to Gray Eagle. Am I correct?
Yes. And, you know, I mean, part of the whole premise of the Cadillac Desert is the fact that water supplies will always be very difficult in the West. I mean, we have a burgeoning population. We have 35 million people that we know of.
I know, and Los Angeles
California
is a
and
desert.
Nevada.
It's built in a desert.
Yeah.
I don't mean to cut you off, because I know how you can go, but we only have just a moment here. So
Okay.
I would just like to, once again, tell the folks at home, we'll be back in a minute. We're with Mark McLaughlin, the weather historian, and if we could, maybe throw up onto the screen his webpage address and phone number if you'd like to get in touch with Mark to discuss any weather-related issues or local history issues. He's more than happy to help you out, and I would advise checking out the stormking.com.
I just posted a whole bunch of Nevada weather records up there, too.
Yeah, it's an interesting site. I really appreciate it. So,
Thanks.
we'll take a break, and we'll be back in a moment, and we're going to talk about some new endeavors that Mark is involved in having to do with alternative energy sources, and look forward to that discussion. We'll be right back. Thank you. Hello and welcome back to Truckee Talks. I'm Ted Owens with Mark McLaughlin. The last segment we finished was weather related and a little bit of history and a nice $20 bet. And you've been quite busy in some other areas that many at home that have seen these interviews for the past couple of years might not expect. You've got well, before I introduce your book, tell me what the Alternative Energy Institute is. What is its mission? What's it about?
The mission, the Alternative Energy Institute, is a nonprofit educational organization, And we are committed to educating the public about an approaching energy crisis, in the sense that we know fossil fuels are non-renewable. We know that they're very polluting. We also know that renewable energies like wind power, solar power, biomass gasification are existing technologies. They do work, but it's not quite a guarantee that this kind of electricity generating resource will replace the overwhelming amounts of cheap oil that we've been using for this century. And what will we need to get us through the 21st century and leaving a planet, passing on a planet to future generations that's not depleted with a ravaged environment and a polluted biosphere and all of these things. We're living large now, but there's a price, there's a cost.
No, I understand that. The cost is, your book is very timely, as we're involved in a war in the Middle East right now, and over the past 30 years, we're now 2 wars over oil and entering our second recession over oil.
That's right.
Might kind of makes you wonder when we're going to learn. Now, you were recently on the National Public Radio, NPR, on your book. I just wanted to ask you, were they more professional than we are here? Are we doing okay?
You're doing fine.
Okay, good. And with that, I'm going to introduce your book, which is, I want to get this right. Can you get it on the camera on a tight shot? Let's see if we can get this so the folks at home can see what it's about. It's called Turning the Corner, Energy Solutions for the 21st Century. And we'll be showing you on the screen how you can order this book at the end of this segment. But for right now, let's talk about it a little bit. One of the things, and I'm going to use the table of contents here, Section 1, Future Shock, the Coming Energy Crisis. That's kind of what you were just speaking of. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Well, it's about trying to understand. We have the entrenched fossil fuel industry, and, it was just last year that California specifically was having this electricity crisis. Now, California dug a hole for itself.
Not even last year. That was this year. That was
that's
5 months ago. Just
I'm out of touch.
Lately.
Yeah, that's right. It was just earlier this year. That's right. And part of that was a variety of different things had all come together for them. But the fact is, we're talking about the revival now of nuclear energy. You hear people starting to say, well, geez, nuclear energy works. It creates electricity. It doesn't contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. Important things for the global international community now is these emissions. But the fact is, it is very expensive. It is not an economical source of power in the long run because they're very expensive to build. It takes 10 years to find a location, permit it, and construct a nuclear power plant.
And, what we don't want to have happen in an energy crisis is have federal or state agencies speeding up that permit process.
And cutting corners and things of that nature. That's
right.
exactly right. And many people don't want to be them near their house. That's for sure. There's a lot of open area, but it's this whole thing. And basically what we're trying to do at AEI is what the institute is called, Alternative Energy Institute, is basically get the people to know, and I'm talking about grade school children, high school children, everybody who is going to be living on this planet and be dealing with these types of situations that are slowly approaching. We're coming to a very important time where we are going to make decisions now that affect generations down the road and also will affect our own lives as we go on.
Now, is this what you're talking about in your section titled, what is it, The Wolf is at the Door?
Yes.
The time is coming to make a decision.
And really one of the things, why I said that the wolf is at the door is because people have been talking about running out of oil for a long time. And that's crying wolf because it doesn't seem to have occurred. But there's only so much oil, and in any finite resource, you can only produce so much of it before you've reached the halfway point, and from that point on, it will slowly ramp down. Now, I've done the research. There are many experts out there that say the oil will be reaching this, what they call the midpoint of depletion, in the next 5 years. And then the optimists say, no, it won't happen until 2020. Either way, we're looking at most likely within the next 10, 15 years, maybe sooner, that they will not be able to meet the global demand of oil. And we know as well as anybody what happens to when the demand for a commodity exceeds supply, the price goes up.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to oil, and the United States, with 4% of the world's population, takes 25% of the oil, what about China, who wants oil for their vehicles? Or, oil, one thing you have to understand, oil is at 97% of its used for transportation.
Right.
We're generating electricity with coal, nuclear, hydro, and now natural gas. One of the problems with the natural gas is it's the cleanest burning of the fossil fuels, but there's not enough of it. I read George Cheney's 2001 or 2002 long-range energy plan.
Mm-hmm.
They don't talk about natural gas very much at all.
Now, in terms of renewable energy sources, you talk about it being a traditional bridge to an alternative future. And explain that to me.
Wind power's been around for 5,000 years, 6,000 years. They've been using wind to crush grain, mill wheat, pump water out of the ground, a variety of things. Technology exists. That is becoming very, but the turbines that they're building today is not like your old Dutch windmill. These things are as tall as the Statue of Liberty, and they really put out a lot of juice. Solar panels, that's the most efficient and most cost-effective. And one thing for renewable energy, for competing with fossil fuels, and this is something that has to be said now because I might forget, and it's really very important. We always say you can't use renewable energy yet because it's too expensive. Fossil fuels are cheaper. Yes, but fossil fuels create, the number that I've seen used is $100 billion a year is what it cost us in health costs due to air pollution from fossil fuels. That's $100 billion a year. Now, if you applied that penalty to gasoline and coal, it would make it more expensive. And if you rewarded clean, renewable systems for being clean and renewable, the price parity would switch immediately. Shift. And they would be now really economical. So it's where are you going to make that call? Are you willing to breathe bad air to have cheaper gas, or what are you willing to do?
What about tidal and ocean thermal? I thought that was an interesting chapter in your
It
book.
is. They call that OTEC, ocean thermal. It's basically using the temperature differential between upper surface bodies of water and deeper levels. And by using that, you can use pressure and things. And they also have tidal, where ingoing and outgoing tides and such can spin turbines and things like that.
Capture the energy.
That's right. They're very diffuse. They're small parts of the world that really can use that. And that's not going to, run New York City, I'll tell you right now.
Well, we have about 4 minutes left. Let's get into the energy revolution and technologies that are on the horizons. Okay. Basically, what I've gotten so far is, we're coming to an impasse. We have technologies that are out there, but there are also other technologies perhaps yet to be developed and exploited. And what would those be?
There is the so-called cold fusion, and there's a variety of things that we can talk about with that. However, it tends to get technical, and skeptics who even believe that this is something that does work believe it's not robust enough to generate the kind of energy amounts that we're going to need. And it's really called fusion in a test tube, in the sense, if the U.S. is spending tens of billions of dollars for hot fusion, where you use a magnetic field to hold this plasma together, and you're going to try to do it. And they're looking at 20, 30 years for that.
The technology is still way out there.
These are all these things in Section 3 of this book, these are the possibilities of emerging breakthrough propulsion and energy.
Which is what you meant by the race for new technologies.
That's right.
And the race is between, are we talking competing countries in the development of this?
Absolutely.
And where does the United States fit into that?
It's hard to tell. I mean, one of the biggest drawbacks in the United States is the organized or the professional level, the scientific community, the academicians and such, they are really not at liberty to delve publicly into new energy technologies. In some ways, if you say, look, I'm working on cold fusion, or I'm working on gravity modification, they're going to excommunicate you from the professional level. You won't be invited to go to conferences and talk about it. You won't get your work published in scientific journals. So when I find people that are doing this research, many of them are in other countries, or they're emeritus professors or scientists who have retired, they're living fine, they don't have to worry about losing their reputation. But I have met many men and women, professionals from Los Alamos National Laboratory and everything, who are really trying to push this. It's going to take a long time.
Well, it's an uphill battle. I know that
That's
there were
right.
technologies that have been around since the 1920s that for many years were put down and squashed by the oil industry. There was no funding for developing that energy because the oil industry didn't want to compete with it, and we have some of this going on here.
And things like this are very destabilizing. You know, they destabilize the status quo. And if we're talking about multi-billion, trillion-dollar industry, when you think about the energy, total energy, you don't want to destabilize it.
No, not that.
But it's getting destabilized underneath us anyway.
It is. Well, we still have to look to the future, and I think that's what you've done an excellent job. I look forward to,
Oh, well, thank you.
to completing your book. Let me put it up one more time for the folks at home.
And I wanted to say, I mean, I wrote this book.
Sure.
It's really quite easy to read. And
we
many resources and footnotes and references in the footnotes, and many of them are internet related. And also on our website, which is www.altenergy.org, we will post changes to the book, updates to the book.
And we've got that on the screen right
There you
now.
go.
That's for the folks at home. You can order Turning the Corner, Energy Solutions for the 21st Century. What is that?
Altenergy.org.
It's a little
Yes.
far away and I need new glasses.
Yeah.
Mark, listen, this has been really a great experience this year. Look forward to
always a
having you
pleasure to
back
be
next
here.
year, and I look forward to spending some time with your book.
Good.
Thanks very much.
Hey, my
Appreciate
pleasure.
it.
You bet. Thank you.
And to you at home, thanks for watching another episode of Truckee Talks. I'm Ted Owens, and have a good evening. Bye now.